The Transportation Safety Board of Canada released this preliminary report this morning on that Delta plane crash in Toronto that happened last month. The one that took off from MSP, was landing in Toronto, and then, as we all remember, flipped upside down, and we remember those images. Fortunately, everybody survived in that. Today, though, just a very small snippet of the bigger report that will be released much later, just about a 2-minute video. I don't think there was any Q&A or anything. So we wanted to do our own Q&A, and who better to do it with us than this familiar face that we've had on here on All Day Live. Matthew Whiz Buckley, former decorated Navy pilot, among many other accolades. Thanks for joining us, Whiz. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about some of the, I guess, are there any big takeaways from this preliminary findings?
Absolutely nothing, right? This is kind of a master of the obvious preliminary report. In aviation, the reason they do preliminary reports is in case there really is some big hazard, meaning a mechanical issue, right? A couple years ago when the 737-800 MAX was going through its stuff, those preliminary reports were critical because it said, hey, these things need to change like yesterday type of thing. But in aviation mishaps like this one, where it's almost guaranteed that it's pilot error, you're not going to get too much out of the preliminary report.
So it's interesting you say that, because as I take a look at just some of the bullet points here of what they did say, and again, you're saying it's very limited, but I'll just kind of read. So the report states several things occurred during touchdown. The plane's side stay, which is attached to the right landing gear, fractured and caused the landing gear to retract. This caused the plane to flip over and broke off the right wing. And then it kind of goes on in these details. As it kind of did break down some of the things that they are saying happened. I mean, you and I talked about this right after the incident. So did the plane seem to do what the plane should have done in that circumstance?
Well, the plane did exactly what the pilot flying the aircraft was inputting as far as control inputs. Let's recall it was runway 23, and the winds were from 270. So that's 40 degrees off of runway heading, and they were gusts, as you saw in the preliminary report, up to about 40 knots. Very sporty conditions, right? So an airliner has to crab into that wind, and then just before touchdown, kind of take the crab out so you can, land properly. They landed not properly, which is going. So the preliminary report is kind of reading like, yeah, we know kind of all these things happen. Why did they happen? Improper landing technique caused the right main landing gear to collapse. Main landing gear just don't collapse on their own. It's extremely rare. In the mishap report, they said, oh, we're still working on some meteorology or whatever that word is to double check the metal and all that type of stuff. But those things aren't designed to break. You need to come down pretty hard and sideways. And then everything that happened after that, it actually was supposed to happen, right? So when the landing gear collapsed, right wing hits, that rips off. Now you got a fireball. And then the left wing, the only wing left, is still developing lift. So of course it's going to start a roll like this because that wing's still flying. But I don't know if you and I talked about this in the past, but thank God it was into the snow, right? Because you saw the initial fireball, and the fireball kind of starts chasing the crash, and then it extinguishes itself. Why? Because of the snow. So thank God this landed in the snow. If this was a dry runway or a field, man, there would have been a lot more deaths.
So you'll have to remind me, what if anything do we know about the pilots in this situation? Training wise, I know obviously this preliminary report doesn't get into that. It looks like they're going to they put that on the table for the future. But what do we know at this point?
Well, all of us in the industry know exactly what happened. So we have a rusty captain. So the captain is a simulator instructor, meaning he works in the schoolhouse. So he works with new hires, does check rides. But if you work in the simulator building, you have to go fly every 90 days or whatever Endeavor's Air's requirements are. You got to get current, right? So he was out doing a currency hop. So he wasn't proficient in the airplane, and he was out trying to get his required landings and takeoff so he can go back to the schoolhouse and be an instructor. So they paired him on this flight with a very young, inexperienced young lady from the That's just a bad pairing. Rusty captain and a new hire. Now, technically, this young lady, she's got a piece of paper. I think she got it a month or two before this mishap that says, you're qualified. You are certified on this aircraft, which means you're certified technically in all weather conditions. But if I was doing crew scheduling for Endeavor, there's no way in hell I would have paired an out of current or not proficient captain with a brand new hire. But let me be blindingly clear. The only person responsible for this crash is the captain. It is not that young lady, right? The captain signs for the airplane. He or she is the ultimate authority. And if she started coming down like really bad, he should have ordered her to go around, add some power, or he should have taken control of the aircraft and gone around or tried to salvage the landing. The fact that he did none of those things means he is ultimately responsible. Even if she was flying the airplane, responsible.
Okay, and Wiz, you know, I talked about this right after it happened too, because it happened, and then the first press conference that was held in Toronto, the officials there said wind didn't have anything to do with this. There was the weather. They seemed to say the weather, and you and I had this conversation, and you said, look at the video. You can see the wind. So can we talk about weather? Because I didn't see anything sort of in the preliminary reports that would have pointed to that, but maybe I missed that.
Real quick, you were stepped on. I didn't hear all of that.
Oh,
sorry
about
that.
Okay. So Wiz, I'm just talking about the weather because you brought this up just a minute ago. When this initially happened, right afterward, there was a press conference in Toronto at the airport, and the officials there said wind does not appear to be a factor in this. And I can't remember if they said weather didn't, but I know for sure wind. And that evening, as a newsroom, we kind of looked at that and went, I don't even, can we report that? Because we can see with our eyes, we'd been taking it live all day long, that the wind was really blowing. In this preliminary report, do they address weather conditions and your thoughts on that?
No, they kind of allude to the weather conditions and that they're still kind of digging into it. So that guy, I think he was a first responder. I don't know if he was a cop or crash rescue guy. Absolutely clueless. Whenever there's a mishap, I grab my phone and I look at our aviation app and I look at the weather. It's the first thing I look at. And I could tell immediately that it was, gusty conditions, 35, 40 knots and 40 degrees off the runway. So that guy, clearly not an aviator. And I think they cleared that up pretty quickly, or somebody did a couple days later, like, oh, well, weather might have been a factor. So that was ready, fire, aim type of thing out of whoever that was. Weather was absolutely a factor. Blowing snow, as was the case in Toronto, can also give some visual illusions of you being higher than you are. So they're going to look into all these aerophysical issues with the aviators in the cockpits, because blowing snow can give you some visual illusions, and that might be part of it. But definitely sporty weather conditions. Even though it was clear out, it was windy and we had blowing snow. So those two things, as you and I have talked about, they're chains in a link. You take one of those chains out, the mishap doesn't happen. Sadly, well, everybody lived, so we're happy, but this mishap should not have occurred. I am still of the belief it's 1,000% pilot error. And the final report will detail all of this stuff. But the preliminary report is it's a little light. I think it's telling us that there was nothing majorly wrong with the aircraft. They're still trying to do the right main landing gear failed. Well, of course it's going to fail if you come down at 1,100 feet per minute. That RJ is supposed to land at about 500 to 600 feet per minute. So it was double the normal rate of descent. Landing gear really isn't designed for that. And a sideways shear factor landing in a crosswind.
Okay. Matthew Whiz Buckley, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for that insight. We'll talk to you again here when we get more information that comes out here in the course of the next year. Appreciate it.
You got it. God bless. Thanks.
Yeah, take care. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All Day Live continues right after this.